Respected clergies. Before I introduce you to the next speaker, I would like to say a few words. We are traveling through a great storm, a storm of difficulties, storm of pain, and storm of an unseen enemy of pandemic, COVID-19. The subject that we chose is very relevant to this situation. It's how we can handle the anxiety. The Kerala women who started working in the US, about 60 to 70% of them are working in the medical field. Either they are nurses, OT, PT, social workers, and a pharmacist. Of course, there are a few doctors, female doctors, so forth and so on. So for these ladies, about 70% is a large number of ladies are frontline workers. They go to work long hours of 12 hours, come home, and their children, taking care of the children, taking care of the husband, of course, elderly parents or grandparents. So they have no place to vent their pain or their difficulties. So I thought this is such a vibrant subject that we chose, how we can reduce the anxiety of everyone. I know all of us, even our clergies go through the same thing. They are also frontline workers, participating in the funerals and all those things. It's such a difficult situation. Again, so with that, I would like to introduce you to our next speaker, that is going to be Zacharia. She is born and brought up in the US. That's one good thing that we can all proud of. She is a clinical social worker working in VA Veterans Affairs Hospital, Chicago, Illinois. She's graduated from University of Chicago with a master's in social work. She's a clinical social worker. She has also certification in drug and alcohol counseling. Presently, she's working to prevent suicide among veterans, which is such a heavy duty job for her. So I'm so proud to introduce her to our meeting. And she is also currently, since 2015, she's been the secretary of counseling for Diocese of Southwest America. So she has a big job and she's a vibrant speaker. With all that, I would like to introduce Susan Zacharia to this meeting. Thank you, Susan.
Respected Tirumeni, Achins, and members of MMVS. Thank you, Auntie, for that introduction. I have a little section that says about me, but I don't have to do that anymore, so thank you for that. I do have a presentation that I'm going to go ahead and share. And that way, as I'm speaking, you can see what I'm referring to. Can you all see the presentation? The slide that's on there?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay. So it's not too much, but there's a lot of information that's on these slides. And so when I was speaking with Rupa Chechi about a month and a half ago about speaking for this event, we had tossed around different topics as to what would be most important for us to address. And one of the things we had talked about is many of you all probably have heard the initial presentations from the counseling ministry where we reviewed survey results that's been widely talked about and published online and on the website. And so Rupa Chechi and I were saying, you know, it's been about 4 years since we've had those sort of discussions and we want to talk about something a little differently, a little different. And this year is quite different than the years past in all of the things that have been coming up, mostly with the pandemic. And like Auntie had mentioned when she was introducing me, many of us are directly impacted by the pandemic because many of us are frontline workers. And so we thought it would be appropriate to talk about anxiety as it relates to the events of this year. So the conversation that we hope to address is coping with 2020. And, you know, it's been an interesting year in not just the pandemic, but there's been a lot of conversations politically about race in the United States. And also with the upcoming election, there's going to be even more conversations, and even more stressors that will be added to this very obvious stressor of a pandemic, a global pandemic. So like Auntie had already done, I had a section here for about me, but she did a great job. You know, I am a clinical social worker, and I have been working in the last 5 to 6 years with different populations. Right now I work with a veteran population addressing suicide. Before I had worked with veterans in their goal of reducing alcohol use and other substance use. And before then, I also worked with women that struggled with eating disorders as well. What I would like to talk about today is how to identify certain signs of stress, whether that looks like anxiety or depression. Just very generally, what does it look like when we are not feeling that well? If we were to go to a doctor and let the doctor know we're not feeling well, oftentimes we talk about our physical health symptoms. Oftentimes we'll know we're not feeling well if we have a headache, if we can't sleep at night, if we have loss of appetite, if certain parts in our bodies hurt. That's how we know we're not physically feeling well. And oftentimes, our physical self is accompanied, closely tied with our mental health as well. There may be something that we're so worried about that makes it difficult for us to fall asleep at night. Or maybe there's something that's on our mind where we have a very difficult time eating. Or maybe we're so worried that we find ourselves eating a lot. And so these warning signs can present itself in many, many ways. So there's a list of warning signs I've listed here. What you will see on the green side, on the left side of this infographic, are warning signs for anxiety. And on the blue side is warning signs for depression. Now, I want to make it clear that everybody feels anxious at some point in their life, and everyone can feel depressed at some point in their life. In the same way that everyone has a headache, everyone has a stomach ache, everyone has maybe a flu in their lifetime, broken bones. These are emotional experiences that are common in our human health experience. So we are not necessarily talking about clinically diagnosable anxiety and depression. We're talking about what anxiety looks like. We're talking about what depression looks like. And I know it might be a little difficult to read because the bullet points might be a little small, so I'm just going to read it out loud as well. And then Rupa JJ, if it's helpful, I can send the PowerPoint. I can email the PowerPoint as well if you want to email it out. So some warning signs of anxiety can be feeling on edge or restless, thinking negatively about situations and things, difficulty concentrating, forgetfulness, difficulty carrying out tasks and making decisions, muscle tension or soreness. So that's an example of how some of this mental health symptoms can impact our physical health or manifest itself in our bodies. Fatigue easily, sleep disturbances such as not being able to fall asleep, persistent worry about situations or things, feelings of panic or fear or uneasiness, irritability, shortness of breath. So for different people, these symptoms look very different. So if I'm nervous, if I'm anxious, I may present with different symptoms than, say, if Rupa Chichi was anxious, because different people are different. In the same way, different people have different sleep patterns, different people have dietary patterns, or different patterns. We have different manifestation of these symptoms. And so what we want to be mindful of is what is baseline for me, what is normal for me, and what does it look like when it's not normal for me, right? So on the right side, you'll see symptoms of depression. Again, this is not, these symptoms are not looking to diagnose anybody. These are symptoms of an experience of depression that we all have experienced in our life. A persistent sad mood, feelings of hopelessness, feeling guilt, worthlessness, loss of interest in pleasurable activities. So this might be usually, you know, I might enjoy gardening, and now these days I just don't enjoy gardening anymore. Decreased energy and tiredness, insomnia or oversleeping, difficulty concentrating and making decisions, low appetite or increased appetite, physical symptoms like body aches, headaches, digestive issues, back pain, and chest pain, irritability, thoughts of suicide or self-harm. And so these are different ways that depression and anxiety can manifest itself. So another thing, an important thing to keep in mind is that it can look different from person to person, and depending on circumstance as well. And so what does this look like, or what can this look like in the middle of this year, right? So in the very beginning, maybe we are caretakers of somebody, an older adult. Maybe we are in a household of people that are working in the front lines, and we might find ourselves during that time, especially earlier on when everything was brand new, we might have found ourselves not knowing how to, we might notice a difference in diet. We might have noticed a difference in sleeplessness. We might notice a difference in our heart rate. Those are all symptoms to be mindful of, all right? And so now, we talk a lot about warning signs. We talk a lot about what it can look like. And really what we want to know is, if I feel this way, what is it that I can do, right? So our next slide is how to deal with stress and anxiety. And there are 3 different ways that I want to take a look at. One is actionable. What is it that I can do to manage these symptoms? And then also, what is it that I can do to address my physical body, but what can I do also to address my mind? We, especially in our community, because we're so used to talking about our physical health, for many reasons. One, because many of our people are in the medical field. And then also the other reality is that mental health, and talking about mental health, has for much of our history, even in the States, been highly stigmatized. So we seem to compartmentalize our health into just physical health, and often neglect our mental health as well. So this slide will talk about how to deal with all of it, using different facets of our health. So let's talk about the body. So that's the middle slide first. So how to deal with stress and anxiety, in terms of how can I use my body to deal with the stress and anxiety. One, limit alcohol and caffeine. And so limiting this can, or both of those, alcohol and caffeine, can aggravate anxiety, trigger panic attacks. And so the caffeine, we may become so adjusted to drinking a high number of cups of caffeine. But what we might find is, if I go a few days without drinking any caffeine at all, I might find my body reacting and being in withdrawal. And because we can tolerate high levels of caffeine, we may not know the impact that it's having on our body. And so there is such a thing as drinking a lot of caffeine, a lot of coffee. Eat well-balanced meals. Don't skip any meals. Always keep healthy, energy-boosting snacks on hand. And so when we're anxious, we might find ourselves losing an appetite, right? And so to remind ourselves that the body and mind are closely tied, even when I don't feel like eating, go ahead and eat, right? It's sort of like, what I like to liken this to is, if we don't, our body and our mind are so closely tied that if we can't rely on one, we should rely on the other. So if I'm not feeling hungry to eat, I know that's my mental health being a little bit off, right? And so if I'm not feeling well enough to eat, but I know I should eat, I should eat. And if I eat, that will make my mental health feel a little bit more improved, right? So it's kind of like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? We can use both to help each other out. Get enough sleep. When stressed, your body needs additional sleep and rest. So ironically, when we're stressed, we might find ourselves not sleeping enough. We'll find a way to prioritize. Instead of trying to feel more relaxed so that I can sleep, find a way that I can sleep so that I become more relaxed. And then exercise daily. That could be for going on short walks, maybe having a video exercise video that we do a few times a week. But exercising also releases those all the necessary energy that's needed so that we can feel better as well. In terms of what we can do with our mind, what we can tell ourselves, accept that you cannot control everything. Put your stress in perspective. Is it really as bad as we think it is, right? Do your best. Instead of aiming for perfection, which is impossible, be proud of whatever you choose to do. So I may have a goal of exercising every day, but maybe the more realistic goal for me is to be able to do it 2 to 3 times a week. Do our best. Maintain a positive attitude, make an effort to replace negative thoughts with positive ones. So become more aware when we are having negative thoughts, what is it that it looks like, and learns what triggers your anxiety. What is it that causes us to feel those warning signs? What is it that causes us to experience those warning signs? And then when you notice them, we can distance ourselves from them and take certain action. And the third item that I want to take a look at is that first infographic, how to deal with stress and anxiety in terms of action. So when I'm confronted directly with the feelings of anxiety, overwhelmed, hopelessness, what is it that I can do right in the moment? Take deep breaths, inhale and exhale slowly. Oftentimes, if you notice, when we're not feeling well, when we're feeling scared, when we're feeling overwhelmed, we will notice a difference in our heart rate and we will notice a difference in our breathing patterns. So to overcome that, be mindful and take mindful deep breaths. So inhale and exhale slowly throughout. Count slowly to 10. That allows us to breathe. Give back to your community. That gives us some actionable things to do. Take some time out and get help online and talk to somebody. And so we have a large network here, and it may be people in our parish, it may be our family members, it may be our friends, but be mindful of who is it that we can speak with as support. And then the last slide that I wanted to show people is this infographic that was released in the beginning of the pandemic. It was released by an Eastern Orthodox mental health organization titled O Camper. And so they created, this was released during Lent actually. And so this infographic title is Coping with COVID-19 for Orthodox Christians. And a lot of this is standard. You'll see tips for coping for adults and children as well. And the children one is probably going to be most important in the upcoming weeks as your children adjust to going back to school. And so some of the things, I don't want to read through all of it because I want to allow for some time for questions and answers sessions. But a few things I do want to mention here for adults, to be mindful of maintaining a regular routine, like we said, of diet, sleep, and exercise, but not just doing them, but to be mindful of how often we do them. Limit our exposure to news. Sometimes the news is always on, which is helpful to know what's going on, but it can also be overwhelming and distract us from actual actions that we ought to be taking. Practice physical distancing and not social distancing. So, we have lots of ways where we can be creative. This is a great example of how typically these sessions would be in person, but instead we have about 217 participants where we can get the same message across in a creative way. So how is it that I can maintain my relationship with those that are important to me, even though precautions will look different? For children, we ought to be talking to them about their fears, about their worries. We ought to be reassuring them that scientists are working on a cure and a vaccine. Remind them that the stay-at-home order is temporary and help them maintain a regular routine in a new world as well. Model healthy coping. And so children are watching us to see what we do to manage our stress and anxiety. Do we get angry when we're nervous? Do we lash out? Do we yell when we're angry or when we're nervous? Because if children see us doing that, that's what the children will take on as well as a way to cope. Take advantage of this opportunity for family time, especially as school opens, and reward children for when they do complete their work and their tasks, because it's much harder to do it in these sort of days than before. And then my favorite part about this infographic is it has separated what we can do for our spirituality during this time as well. So prayer, maintaining a regular prayer routine in the midst of this, right? So in addition to regular exercise, diet, we also want to maintain regular prayer routine. So praying daily, watching live stream, sitting in silence daily, reading the scriptures, reading spiritual books. Fasting, so this was released during the Great Lent, and so what this section is referring to is the Great Lent, but it's also appropriate for this fasting period that we just came from. And then almsgiving, make an added offering to your parish, donate closet items, donate blood, donate different things, Skype with relatives, connect children, grandparents, etc., etc. So these are more coping strategies for us as Orthodox Christians. All right. So my last slide is just a slide that says for questions. So I will go ahead, and that's the entirety of my presentation. Historically, usually a lot of the informative items have come out from question and answer sessions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and go ahead and open it up for any questions that may be coming up.
Susan, I congratulate you for your presentation, especially your emphasis on prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. So that is part of our spirituality. So
Yeah.
any anxiety should be handled along with other physical exercise and other things. The important thing is a prayerful life. I thank you that as a youngster, you emphasized on that dimension. So thank you.
Thank you, Trimini. Yeah, I think, we have a misconception of compartmentalizing our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health, et cetera, et cetera. But if we truly do believe that as a human, we are stewards of our resources, our body is a part of our expression of our faith. Our mind is a part of our expression of faith. And so eating well, exercising, taking care of our bodies is also a way of respecting the body that Christ has given us. And so that is a spiritual practice, and at the same time to remind us of the fact that our body is given to us by God, we must remind ourselves in prayer that our body is not our own.
Yeah, sometimes I feel we need some sort of conversation between our mind and body and our soul and body.
Yes.
That kind of conversation within us.
Yes.
And that is a lot.
Yes.
And that's a kind of holistic approach to handle those anxieties and risks. So thank you.
Of course. Yes.